I didn't tell my husband, I didn't tell my sons, I didn't tell my own family. And the reason I now understand is because I thought that it was my fault. I thought that I was in the wrong place, I had done the wrong thing. It didn't make any sense to me in my 20s why it would be my fault. And it's taken me 40 years to understand that it certainly was not. And I really appreciate Lavinia. And I said, if our generation had been more courageous and had spoken up, but now I'm dedicating my life and delighted to be here with my colleagues in a bipartisan way, men and women coming together. Our staff has done an extraordinary job, young men and young women. The time is now, and Mariska said this morning to us, we have a moment and we can really change the world. So our intention is to bring together members of Congress to advance legislation and initiatives to address sexual violence. In some of the areas we intend to tackle K through 12 education, college campus safety, military sexual trauma, online harassment, and improved data collection and law enforcement training. But we're starting here today with the Rape Kit Backlog because we understand that this is really at the core, and Mariska said it so well this morning. It's a demonstration that as a society, we are not caring about victims, survivors of sexual assault, men and women. After experiencing the trauma of sexual assault and an intensely personal sexual assault forensic evidence exam, no survivor should experience the pain and distress of having their sexual assault kit backlogged. There's no other crime that we would do this, not process the evidence. The failure to test backlogged sexual assault kits allows rapists to remain on the streets and puts more people at risk. And we know this to be true now from the evidence of communities that have gone back to test. And I think we'll hear from Mariska and others about what we've learned about serial predators. I'm encouraged by previous federal bipartisan efforts, the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, which have enabled communities to test their backlogs, re-engage with survivors, and bring sexual assault predators to justice. Congress must continue to find these federal programs to build on the progress we have made reducing the sexual assault kit backlog. And funding is important, and we will be prepared to discuss that with you. I'm eager to explore the important topics of access to sexual assault nurse examiners, better known as SANE nurses. SANEs provide survivors with compassionate, trauma-informed support for their short and long-term recovery of survivors. Unfortunately, in communities across this country, and particularly in rural communities such as my district in New Hampshire, many survivors do not have access to SANE nurses, and I'd love to explore ways that we can make that available. Congress owes it to survivors to ensure that everyone has access to a SANE nurse. So thank you for being here. I thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and I look forward to this discussion. I give it back.
Thank you, Representative Custer. Representative Meehan, if you have a chance to do the opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank my colleagues for being part of this bipartisan task force and identifying this full gamut of important issues that we want to collectively address. But I can't think of anything that is more important for us to kick it off than this important issue that has this distinguished panel before us today. So I thank you each for your presence here today. But quite honestly, I thank you for your dedication to this issue, to your professional work. As a former prosecutor, we have had the ability or the opportunity, I think, to engage with victims of a broad spectrum of issues. But in my own sense, there was really nothing more dehumanizing than someone who has had to go through the crime of being sexually assaulted in and of itself. And it's a different type of victim than any other we deal with because, I think, as Representative Custer and others have discussed, nobody considers themselves, if they are robbed on the side of the street, as somehow participant, and yet we so often see the victims beginning to question what their role in relationship is to this. And so how we respond is every bit as important to that victim as the mechanics of this process that we're going through. And we, I think, have also seen open themselves to you. And that's often what we find is this, once somebody has a place to go, these stories are overwhelming in the form of not just the emotion, but this search for a place to help give me some closure. But not even closure, I think it's the issue, give me back control of this thing that was stolen from me. And I thank you for allowing us to go on this journey together. I will note, and I hope everyone here will pay attention to a film that was put together by Ms. Hargitay and was released last night. I am evidence to what is identified already as remarkable response. I wish you luck as you move forward and continue to use that as the voice of some victims who have experienced this and where we need to go to continue. Jennifer Marcos, I want to thank you for your work in this space, because one of the important places we made progress is with the sexual assault nurse examiners. And again, it goes to that first experience, post-trauma, and how somebody is engaged, and the importance of us not only being able to collect the evidence, but the humiliating process of it could be a 5 to 6 hour procedure. So we close with the idea that having had that procedure, and now you've been doubly victimized, what happens with that evidence? And if after going through all of that, we leave it sitting on a shelf, we have become part of the process. And lastly, Michael Lloyd, I want to thank you for your dedication in your office, because you're demonstrating that there is an interest on the part of law enforcement and so many to do this right. And most offices want to do what's right for the victims. Some things are just issues of resources. Sometimes it's just not an appreciation for what you can tell us how we've been able to do this better and what we can continue to do to close it. So I want to thank this remarkably experienced panel that will bring broad perspective, and my colleagues for putting this issue front and center, and it couldn't be more timely. And Ms. Hargitay, I wish that your film and others will allow us to continue to press forward not only for this hearing, but work collectively on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you're back.
Thank you very much, Representative Mia, and now Representative Spear.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. After this particularly traumatic week for all of us, it is really very soothing to me personally that we have a bipartisan group of members here focused on a very important issue. So I want to thank my colleagues all for being here and being part of this very important effort. I want to especially thank Lavinia Masters, a victim survivor who is here, because it is very hard to have to recall that experience over and over again. And for our star-studded panels who are here, Ms. Hargitay, if it weren't for you, Joyful Foundation wouldn't be here, I Am Evidence wouldn't be filmed, and we are deeply grateful for your long-term commitment to this issue. You know, I look around this room, and there are mostly women here. And we know the statistics that 1 in 4 women are probably going to be sexually assaulted in their lives. And if we look at your faces, we know that some of you have. And I wish we would have as many men in this room as we have women in this room, because this issue will not be fully addressed until we have a complete understanding by both sexes of what really goes on. Over 30 years ago, I was then a county supervisor, and one of the deputy DAs came in to meet with me and said, we're having a terrible time getting convictions on rape cases. And I said, well, tell me what the problem is. And one of the problems was that there wasn't a comprehensive investigation done and an actual evaluation of the victim when they came into the emergency room. There was an issue around the chain of custody of the evidence. And so that started my effort to try and address the issue. The conviction rate went way up. So when there's commitment by people to do the right thing, we can do the right thing. There is no clearer demonstration of our country's lack of regard for sexual assault survivors than ignoring the gross backlog of sexual assault cases. We would never, ever let the DNA in a murder case sit on a shelf. And yet, it is commonplace to let the DNA of sexual assault victims sit on the shelf. The backlog of kits, the bureaucratic discrimination against survivors, and the lack of sufficient sexual assault response teams and sexual assault nurse examiners is an injustice committed against women because they are women. And we must refuse to let this injustice stand.
Thank you. I now recognize Ms. Hargitay for her opening statement.
Good morning. I just want to start by saying thank you so much for your heartfelt comments and your passion for this work. I'm Mariska Hargitay, and I'm speaking to you today as the president and the founder of the Joyful Heart Foundation. I just want to thank the task force for making the Rape Kit Backlog the topic of your first briefing. By elevating this issue, you are sending a powerful message to survivors of sexual assault that their cases matter. They matter. You are demonstrating to law enforcement and prosecutors that we must work to do everything we can to hold offenders accountable and keep our communities safe. You have my full statement on record, so I'd like to use my time today to focus on how far we have come in addressing the untested rape kit backlog in recent years, and that discussion cannot begin without acknowledging the significant sea change that is happening across this country, seeded by the actions of the federal government. In 2014, Congress created the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative to provide jurisdictions with critically needed resources to test backlogged kits, create multidisciplinary teams to investigate and prosecute related cases, and address the need for victim notification and re-engagement with the criminal justice system. The impact of SAFI grants cannot be overstated. We have heard from law enforcement and prosecutors that the funds, as well as the requirement to create a team to undertake systemic reform, are bringing communities together like never before. These focused resources are helping law enforcement get serial criminals off the street, easing the burden on personnel, facilitating community engagement, and making neighborhoods safer. We have heard the same feedback from victim advocates. SACI funds are helping agencies already stretched thin to implement reform and catalyze positive changes. I first testified in Congress of the Rape Kit Backlog back in May 2010, and the national landscape today is very different. Then we had no idea how many untested rape kits were sitting on shelves in police storage facilities and crime labs. Advocates' best guess was an estimate of 400,000, but now that number is disputed. The reality is that because most jurisdictions do not have systems for tracking or counting rape kits, we cannot be sure of the total number. However, through public record requests, investigative journalism, grassroots advocacy, and state legislative reforms, we're beginning to understand the scope of the backlog nationwide. Since 2010, more than 200,000 untested rape kits have been accounted for, and 21 states and Washington, D.C. have passed laws requiring audits of untested rape kits. When I testified in 2010, there were no state rape kit reform laws on the books. Today, that trend has shifted. Since January 1st, 2017, 71 rape kit reform bills have been introduced in 32 states, and 10 states have laws. Joyful Heart has launched a national campaign to pass comprehensive rape kit reform legislation in all 50 states by 2020. Since 2010, 30 states have enacted some type of rape kit reform, and last week, Texas became the first state in the nation to enact all 6 pillars of our national best practices. Through SACE grants, we are also seeing a change in law enforcement's understanding of the impact of trauma on survivors. Jurisdictions now understand this important perspective and are implementing trauma-informed and victim-centered notification practices that seek to avoid re-victimization and further harm. Although we have seen progress, there is still much more work to be done. Today, only 8 states have laws requiring testing in both current or backlogged kits. That means in most states, the decision to send kits for testing is left up to the discretion of an individual. We must reverse that trend to ensure that every kit connected to a reported case is tested. The numbers don't lie. Testing all kits solves crimes and saves lives. The survivor's legislative district should not determine the outcome of their case or their right to information. On behalf of all survivors across the country, I thank you for your attention on this issue, and I look forward to continuing this dialogue. I know that you join me in commending the jurisdictions that are taking responsibility for reform, and together we are committed to raising awareness around those who have not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hargitay. Ms. Masters?
Good morning. I am Lavinia Masters, and I am a survivor of rape, and I am an advocate now. I always like to start out that my victimization was 3 parts. The first part was the actual violent rape, where my perpetrator, Kevin Turner. I love sharing his name because I used to be afraid to even speak about him, but now the shame is on him, it's no longer on me. So Kevin Turner decided that he would come into my home one night while I was asleep on the couch and rape me violently at knife point. I was only 13 years old at the time. It was hard because as a child, you're supposed to feel safe in your home, especially when your family is there. But Kevin Turner decided that he was going to attack me, put a knife to my throat. He could have taken my life. And so that was the first part of my victimization. My second part was when the police came out and I had to go to Park Memorial Hospital and do the exam. It was tedious. To me, they were insensitive. Was it your boyfriend? Did you let him in the window? The questions they asked me, they kind of helped me feel like it was my fault of the things that happened to me on that night. And my third part of my victimization was to find out 20-something years later that my kit was sitting on the shelf. That me as a child thinking, oh, these were looking high and low for the guy that raped me. Surely you had some concern for a child that was raped in the middle of the night. Surely you didn't discriminate against my skin color. You didn't discriminate against me as a female. You didn't discriminate against my age. You didn't discriminate against my gender. Surely you would look for the rapists that tried to almost take the life of a child. I was disappointed with that, but here I am, over 30-something years, and at that point in my life, I said, 3 strikes, you're out. No more. I will not stand for this. I will not allow this to happen to another victim in my nation, in my land, where I live, and where I'm supposed to feel safe, and where I give my life and I give my everything to be a part of this country. So I stand as an advocate today, and I stand letting you know that I didn't believe in monsters as a child, but Kevin Turner made me believe in monsters. He made me believe in werewolves. He made me believe that these vicious monsters will attack you. And once they attack victims, we take on these hideous formations of ourselves. We become dark. We get in these places that nobody understands, you begin to look at us differently. I started out as a straight-A student. Over the summer when he raped me, July 31st, 1985, when I went back to school, I was different. Something was wrong with me. I didn't understand it myself. I didn't understand why my grades began to go down. I didn't understand why I looked at people differently. I didn't understand why I didn't trust any man that crossed my path. I didn't understand the things that I was going through. I didn't have the services. I didn't have the counseling. I didn't have anyone to reach out and say, it's going to be okay. We're here for you. We're going to get through this. I had to try to make it happen all on my own. My parents didn't understand. I'm thankful today to be here because I feel the passion that you have on this panel to say no more. I feel the passion that you feel for us to say we did not forget about you because I felt like I was forgotten about. I felt that no one cared what happened to me that night. I felt alone. I felt desolated. I felt terrified. I began to take on this hideous form of a monster myself, and I wore a mask throughout life, pretending that I was something that I was not, wanting to be free, wanting to live my life to the fullest, but I couldn't. But I'm thankful once again for the Rape Kit Backlog and the justice system and the past senators that I've worked with, and just being an advocate because I'm in a better place now. And I'm excited about the work you're doing, and I'm here for you, and I'm here for all victims. And I'm just like with Hurricane Katrina, I said I'm going back, and I'm going to save, and I'm going to rescue, and I'm going to be a voice, and I'm going to let them know that we are survivors, we can't stand. I'm empowered today because of things like this, the Bipartisan Task Force. We've decided we're going to get together, and we're going to say we're going to put everything else aside because your life matters to me. My life matters. I don't care what anybody else says anymore. My life matters to me. I wore a mask for far too long. I'm free, and I'm here, and I'm going to use my voice, and I'm going to smile, and I'm happy about everything that I do, everything that I encounter. My life matters. Every victim lives matter, and that's what I'm here for today. And I'm just excited to be a part of this, and I thank you for your passion today.
Thank you, Ms. Masters, and I think I can speak on behalf of all of us. We certainly appreciate you being here with us today, sharing your story, and apologize for what took place for 27 years. That's why we're here today.
Yes.
Ideally, at this point, if I did introduce some other members of our panel, Representative Tom O'Halloran and Representative Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, who joined us here today. All right, I would head up now to Mr. James for his testimony. Thank you. For opening statement.
Congressman Joyce, Congressman Custer, Congressman Spear, Congressman Better?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. I want to thank you for inviting me today to discuss the Department of Justice's efforts to reduce rape kit backlogs and increase the number of sexual assault nurse examiners. Before I begin, I should note that congressional guidelines on objectivity and nonpartisanship require me to confine my remarks to the technical, professional, and non-evocative aspects of the matter under consideration at this bipartisan task force. I can discuss DOJ programs related to rape kit backlogs and SANEs. I can also respond to questions from task force members, but I am limited to addressing issues within my field of expertise, and I cannot answer questions from the public. DOJ has several programs that are specifically targeted at reducing rape kit backlogs and expanding the number of SANEs. The Sexual Assault Kit Initiative provides funding for inventorying and testing rape kits, assigning designated personnel to work and investigate new leads, supporting victims, developing evidence tracking systems, and training law enforcement on sexual assault investigations. The Sexual Assault Forensic Evidence Inventory Tracking and Reporting Program provides funds to inventory existing rape kits, track them as they move forward towards disposition, and provide the public with data on how they are being processed. However, grants under this program cannot be used to test rape kits. Since FY 2010, Congress has appropriated funding for a sexual assault forensic exam program. This funding can be used for the purposes specified in Section 304 of the Justice for All Act, which authorized grants for training, technical assistance, education, and equipment related to the collection and analysis of DNA samples by medical personnel and those treating victims of sexual assault, which includes SANEs. DOJ has several programs where funds can be used for reducing backlogs or hiring SANEs, but these are not the sole purposes or the focus of the program. For example, NIJ's Capacity Enhancement and Backlog Reduction Program provides funding for analyzing DNA samples and increasing the capacity of public laboratories. Funds under this program can be used to help analyze biological evidence collected as a part of a sexual assault kit and submitted to a crime lab for analysis. In addition, funds under OVW's stock grant program may be, among other things, used to identify and conduct inventories of rape kit backlogs, develop policies for responding to those backlogs, and training medical personnel in the collection and preservation of evidence in sexual assault cases. Finally, DOJ has some programs like the Burn JAG program, which provides funding for a variety of criminal justice purposes. And while funds under these programs might be used for reducing rape kit backlogs or supporting SANEs, these are not the specified purposes of the program. Again, thank you for your invitation to brief the task force this morning, and I look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. James, and let me assure you, this isn't about politics, this is about justice. And my representative, Swashman Schultz, and I say that we're appropriators, we're not Democrats or Republicans, we're appropriators. We're just here to do the right thing, so I appreciate your invitation on that, but feel free to expound as questions come up. Saying that is we also have another group here, and we say we're just prosecutors, or former prosecutors, or prosecutor wannabes, but we really all appreciate it. It's amazing how it cuts through party lines, and when we talk about things like heroin, and talk about things like sexual assault, it doesn't stop at any one county's borders or any one state borders, and that's why I appreciate our next witness, Prosecutor O'Malley, and the work that his office has done in finding funds within his own department to make sure that we try to process those backlogs. I recognize Prosecutor O'Malley for his opening statement.
Thank you, Co-Chairman Joyce, and esteemed members of this committee. In Cuyahoga County, and I'm just going to ad-lib, but we are ahead of the curve because of initial grants by the Department of Justice. In 2007 and 2009, the Department of Justice gave Cuyahoga County money to begin investigating cold case homicides. We used that, it was also geared towards DNA evidence. We used that money to look at homicides with sexual motivation. And as a result of that, we ended up solving 17 homicides and 14 rapes. In 2009, in the city of Cleveland, we had a horrendous crime committed by an individual by the name of Anthony Soul. Over the course of a number of years, brutally raped and murdered 11 women in the city of Cleveland. As a result of that crime and the deficiencies it demonstrated throughout the criminal justice system, a focus was shone upon the issue of rape kits within our county. Within Cuyahoga County alone, there was 5,000 untested rape kits sitting on the shelves of law enforcement. A number that's inexcusable and really understandable. Throughout the state of Ohio, we had 14,000 rape kits that had been sitting on shelves. But because we had those initial Department of Justice grants, and because we had investigators hired who were predominantly retired police officers, and because we were geared up to begin to handle this, all efforts were put into an initiative by Attorney General Mike DeWine, who started a program throughout the state of Ohio to test all rape kits within our state. He provided funding at a statewide level. Cuyahoga County continued to receive grants so that we could hire investigators. We had 5,000 kits, but we had 6,700 sexual assault incidents that we need to investigate. Currently, of those 6,700 cases, which is almost unimaginable, the victims out there who have not yet received justice within our county. We have processed 3,700 investigations. Again, we have a task force now that started from a simple Department of Justice grant in 2007 that includes representatives from the State Attorney General's office, local police agencies, our county sheriff's department. We have representatives from the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center embedded within our task force to assist victims. And together we have a collaborative effort to investigate these brutal crimes, seek justice for the victims, and close out these cases on behalf of the residents we all serve. While this was going on, representatives in the state of Ohio also assisted us in this endeavor by passing state laws, one that moved back the statute of limitations to 25 years. It also mandated that anybody arrested for a felony offense within the state of Ohio would immediately receive a medical swab so that we could put that into the system to assist us in solving these crimes. Again, what we have accomplished within our own county could not have been accomplished without the assistance of the federal government. As many of the representatives up there are former prosecutors, law enforcement is taxed with handling the current issues, let alone trying to go back 20 years and dealing with issues from 20 years ago. But we must do it on behalf of all of these victims. And so while we move forward, we are doing the best we can in our own county and throughout the state of Ohio, but we continue to need assistance from the federal government in our efforts to bring justice to 14,000 cases from our state. Again, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your leadership in this division. I want to thank our panelists, particularly our victims out there with, like Ms. Masters, have found the courage to come forward and represent all victims out there who need our help. Again, I just want to thank the panel today.
And thank you for being here, Prosecutor O'Malley. And I'd also like to recognize at this time a distinguished lady from Michigan, Emmy, who has joined us here as a member of our panel as well. And again, moving on, Dr. Marcus, if you'd like to give a
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Markowitz, and I'm a forensic nurse examiner. I'm a past president of the International Association of Forensic Nurses and the current chair of the Government Affairs Committee there. I want to thank Chairman Custer, Chairman Spear, Chairman Meehan, Chairman Joyce, and the members of the Bipartisan Task Force for the opportunity to speak to you today about the work of sexual assault nurse examiners and sexual assault forensic examiners and the challenges patients face in gaining access to our services. IAFN is a professional organization of nurses who provide specialized health care for patients affected by violence and trauma. We establish and provide standards of practice and education for forensic nurses. Our members have the knowledge and expertise to decrease both short and long-term healthcare consequences of violence, improve patient recovery, and lower healthcare costs. Forensic nurses integrate the evidentiary needs of patients into our overall medical evaluation and treatment in a seamless process. We provide medical testimony in court when necessary and consult with legal authorities as well as other members of the multidisciplinary team. Sexual assault nurse examiners, or SANEs, are the most recognized discipline within forensic nursing. Studies reveal that medical forensic examinations conducted by SANEs result in more positive experience for patients in the healthcare system and are significantly associated with increased prosecution rates for these particular crimes. My testimony today will highlight 3 priority areas for SANEs as we strive to provide specialized quality care to sexual assault patients across the country. 1, expanding access to SANE services. 2, enhancing SANE sustainability through funding and continuing education. And 3, broadening public understanding of SANE services. In regards to expanding access, as clinicians, we understand the importance of comprehensive sexual assault medical forensic examinations conducted by specialists and readily accessible to patients across the United States. Although there is recognition that SANEs are the optimal healthcare provider for patients presenting after sexual abuse and assault, only 17% of hospital emergency departments including those within designated level 1 and level 2 trauma centers, have SANEs or SAFEs available. Level 1 and 2 trauma centers are able to manage virtually every aspect of critical injuries, including prompt availability of care by a variety of specialties. The only designated aspect of care missing from the requirements for level 1 and level 2 trauma centers is the sexual assault specialist. At a minimum, processes should be in place to ensure all adult and pediatric level 1 and level 2 trauma centers provide prompt access to SANEs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, regardless of the age of the patient. This can be accomplished through on-site SANE services, through contracts with community-based SANE programs to respond around the clock to patients who've been sexually assaulted, or formalized transfer agreements with area programs, either hospital or community-based, to ensure rapid response to these patients. In doing so, a majority of Americans would have access to SANE services, expanding availability in both rural and urban areas. The second point regarding enhancing SANE sustainability through funding continuing education is a significant concern for us. Sustainability requires that we put money into both expanding SANE programs as well as moving into new patient populations, healthcare systems, and organizations. While there may be agency support for starting new programs or grant dollars available for initial education, funding is also needed for continuing education. Competency and currency of practice are critical for SANEs, and as with other healthcare specialties, continuing education, access to the newest technologies, and familiarity with the state of the science ensures patients are provided high-quality care. Continuing education also benefits the criminal justice system, with access to SANEs able to testify to the full extent of their education and clinical experience. However, funding ongoing education must be prioritized. Too often, it is left to the individual SANE to cover the costs. Which brings me to my final point regarding broadening public understanding of SANE services. SANEs improve the quality of evidence collected during the course of the medical forensic exam, which is a critical benefit to sexual assault patients. However, the sexual assault evidence collection kit is only one aspect of the patient encounter, and it's vital that SANEs are recognized as much for their ability to provide comprehensive health care as our ability to provide detailed evidence collection and maintain chain of custody. Research has identified myriad acute and chronic health issues that occur at higher rates in sexual assault patients than their non-assaulted counterparts. SANEs have the ability to attend to the unique healthcare needs of patients, connect patients with follow-up resources and referrals for short and long-term medical issues, and collaborate with professionals both within the medical community and with ancillary disciplines to ensure targeted, individualized care to sexual assault patients across the lifespan. However, research is greatly needed to understand how patient outcomes differ with specialized sexual assault care when that is provided. While it's become clear that patients who receive SANE care have improved criminal justice outcomes, there's virtually no research that provides us with data related to healthcare outcomes. I hope you'll give consideration to what I've shared. I appreciate your time, and I'm willing to answer any questions from the task force. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Markowitz. And lastly, Mr. Bell, do you have an opening statement or something you'd like to say here?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, co-chairs David Joyce, Patrick Meehan, Ann Kuster, Jenny Spear, and distinguished members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to testify about our work to end sexual violence. As Prosecutor O'Malley highlighted, in Ohio we learned that we had 14,000 backlog rape kits from a period of time between 1993 and 2009. Over 6,700 of those kids were from our area, Cleveland, Ohio, Cuyahoga County area. Compounding the problem with the backlog was that there was a 20-year statute of limitations in Ohio that was bearing down on us as prosecutors. We knew that unless we reviewed each one of these cases, we were going to run out of time on our watch. So we took it very seriously. We had sometimes 1 day, sometimes 2 hours before the grand jury time would run out and we would lose a case. In order to make the most of our resources, we understand that we had to form a task force with several agencies detailing personnel to one physical location, which is very, very important. Our belief was that using a multidisciplinary approach in that one location would yield the best results. Because of the volume of the investigations, we needed to prioritize our cases as well. We tackled the oldest cases first before losing them to time. and using CODIS we were able to identify many defendants. Some we were not able to identify, but we were able to indict them as John Doe defendants using their DNA profiles as identification. Now we are concentrating on the serial sex offenders who are out on the streets or who will be out of prison within 1 year. To give you an idea of that magnitude, as well as the danger to our community, of the 6,700 rape kits being investigated, testing and a review of their criminal histories revealed that there are at least 670 serial sex offenders. The essence of the multidisciplinary approach is to share ideas among the task force members as well as sharing ideas with other jurisdictions. Our office began an annual best practices summit that continues to this day. The first summit was in Cleveland in 2014, Memphis 2015, Detroit 2016, and the next one will be held in Portland in 2017. These 4 cities have very similar task forces. The task forces have the same name to encourage uniformity. The task forces keep statistics to measure ourselves. We work with RTI International to provide our data to make sense of our progress. Earlier this year, Case Western Reserve University partnered with RTI to hold a county collaborative meeting of the task forces, Houston, Portland, Dallas, Detroit, Memphis, Washington State, and Kansas State, and others to discuss what statistics would and should be collected across the task forces. We've established 4 pillars of best practices. First, test all kids. When you test all kids, you develop leads that solve the identity of the stranger rape cases. 56 of our serial rapists have been identified as both an acquaintance rape as well as a stranger rapist on a different case. Second, swab all felony arrestees. The more arrestees swab, the more robust CODIS becomes, and the more the victim's cases you will solve. Third, investigate all positive and negative rape kit reports they were received from the laboratory as well. We've solved rape cases, even on cases where there is little DNA or there is no DNA, because the police reports have revealed that there's secondary pieces of evidence that you might be able to present to the lab for testing. And lastly, investigate with a victim-centered approach. It's a very important pillar of our best practices. We use victim advocates to notify and stay in contact with our victims. We follow victim notification protocols that have been reviewed by our Cleveland Rape Crisis Center as well as the Joyful Heart Foundation. Obviously, testing the kids is the first step, but after testing is when the very detailed work begins. You don't just indict a case once the DNA is discovered. So although the funding has been terrific in order to make sure that kids get tested, additional funding is needed for those investigators, advocates, and prosecutors to bring those cases together. Ohio's made a very significant investment as well. The Attorney General's office, Michael Wine, to test all those kids, had to put forth a $4 million investment in robotics and personnel. Our office has invested $1 million per year towards the effort. The Attorney General's office has also invested an additional $500,000 for personnel. The Cleveland Police Department has invested over $100,000 a year towards the effort, and our county council has invested $679,000 per year and has said that they would do so for the next 4 years that we will need to complete the project. In 2015 and 2016, we received $2 million grants from the Department of Justice to investigate and prosecute. With the grants, we hired 20 investigators, 4 victim advocates, and 8 prosecutors. I want to reiterate what Prosecutor O'Malley outlined. Our success began with the DOJ funding in 2006 to establish a cold case unit. The DOJ funding on 3 separate occasions over the last 10 years has served as the foundation for all of these partner contributions. Without it, our structure could not sustain the work we do. We parlay the money that you give us, and we ask our partners to also become investors. They see that that foundation is there, and they know that we will be able to sustain the work that we do. In Cuyahoga County alone, we tested all of the rape kits submitted by the police, and we are investigating all of those 6,700 rape kit cases. We've completed 3,726. We have less than 3,000 cases to finish. We've solved 661 victims' cases, and that would never have been solved or prosecuted without this effort. We have indicted 595 separate unique defendants, and the 600 who 174 of those defendants, and we anticipate nearly 1,000 defendants will be offended. Our conviction rate is 92.6%, and on average, each defendant has received a sentence longer than 10 years. The impact of sexual violence extends beyond the victim. Using the National Institute of Health Studies, we have calculated the economic harm caused by these rapists since the time that they should have been investigated, prosecuted, and put into prison. Each type of crime has an average cost associated with it: murder, burglary, breaking and entering. We've added the cost of each of these indicted rapists' subsequent crimes that they have been convicted of since the rape that they committed. Our first 593 defendants have caused $440 million in economic harm to the state of Ohio. This harm would not have occurred had these kids been tested and the victims' cases been investigated and prosecuted. What is the economic savings? Only when the task force prosecutes the cases does the community realize the savings. We are fortunate to work with one of the country's best research institutions, Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland. Their research indicates that the Sexual Assault Task Force is projected to produce a net savings of $38,700,000 to our community. The savings derives from getting these dangerous offenders off the streets before they commit further crimes. Putting it another way, for every rape kit tested, the community saves $8,893 in future economic harm. Expanding the capacity of CODIS is important. In 2011, Ohio was one of those states that enacted the law that all arrestees who are felony arrestees are to be swabbed by the police. This should happen at the felony booking, just like fingerprinting. It ensures identification, and it will let law enforcement know if the arrested person's DNA matches to other crimes like rape kits or a murder scene or a burglary scene. If rape kits are on one branch of the CODIS tree, then swabbing felony arrestees is the other branch of the tree. There are thousands of felons who've never been arrested as swabbed, and we need to learn how systemic this is nationally. We believe that over 6,000 people arrested were never swabbed in the Cuyahoga County area. Swabbing all felony arrestees is crucial to solving these stranger rape cases. In fact, since we've indicted those 122 John Doe defendants, we have been able to determine who 8 of them are. Going back to locate swabbed felons who owe their DNA has a cost, and we and other task forces will need funding to solve that problem. Case Western's study shows we realize savings when we follow up the kid testing with prosecutions of the criminals. To do that, we have to have proper resources, investigators, advocates, and prosecutors. And we in Ohio have been blessed because the Attorney General's office has tested the kids. Now we are at second phase, investigating and prosecuting. Other task forces will get to this point, and they need to know that the money will be there so they can plan to follow up on the tested kids. Testing is important, but the real work and real commitment to the taxpayers is only realized when funds are committed to hire those personnel that are needed to do the job. If other county prosecutors, other police chiefs, other mayors know that that funding is there, then they can become invested to see the job through. The next steps, as the states moves to pass laws to test all rape kits and swab all felony arrestees, funding will be needed to complete the prosecutions of the 1993 through the 2011 cases. Submitting the pre-1993 backlog rape kits will be essential. That is the law in Ohio, and it is the law in numerous other states. Investigating those pre-1993 rape kits, the ones before the statute of limitations, will solve those John Doe rape cases between 1993 and 1998. Hiring advocates to notify victims and providing counseling and support. Hiring investigators to swab, locate felons who were never swabbed at their arrest. This will help solve cases and deter future crimes. We have some rapists who understand that they will be caught, and in their interviews after they've been prosecuted, realize that they may be caught because of the crime that they committed, and have specifically said that they stopped their behavior because of it. So there is a deterrent effect here, very specific deterrent effect. Regarding swabbing arrestees, our office is instituting a new policy that asks that our court on each case make sure that defendants have been swabbed. Our assistant prosecutor run criminal record checks at the initial charging hearing, arraignment before guilty pleas and sentencing, expungements, and we're working with the Cleveland Police and the Sheriff's Office so they implement proper procedures to swab all felony arrestees. We'd like to thank the task force for allowing us to testify, and we owe our success to the funding from the Department of Justice. They provided us a blueprint for the early success, the Attorney General's Office in Ohio for testing all the kids in a timely manner, and our partners, Cleveland Police, Sheriff, PCI, and Rape Crisis in this multidisciplinary approach. Our task force has reached this high level of success in prosecutions and convictions, but other task forces will be sure to follow in these same footsteps as long as they have the proper resources that your committee and members of Congress would provide. On their behalf, we'd like to recommend that this body continues to fund this effort that ends sexual violence against women nationwide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Feel free. I agree. As a former member of Chief Justice in Ohio, I'm very proud of the work that you've done and appreciate all you continue to do going forward. We'd like to recognize some of the members who come in after this, and the Organic Committee will do this in order in which they motion to gather, and if you have any questions, Representative O'Connor.
Well, questions could go on for hours, obviously, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I represent an area in Arizona that has a lot of Native American rural areas. It doesn't have the type of assets that we've seen discussed here today. And I'm very concerned about that whole process. In fact, on the Hopi Reservation and the Navajo Reservation, the per capita offender case is higher than in areas of urban areas. And so, but my background is one of, I was a rape investigator and homicide investigator in the city of Chicago 4 years ago. And I would have thought that in our society today we would have come a lot longer way than we have today. What I heard today is shocking. I was shocked when I first heard about rape kits being left on the shelves. I was shocked when I saw the lack of understanding within our society of what a victim goes through. When you have to sit with somebody that has just gone through that trauma, then understanding the trauma continues throughout their life and has an impact on families. And Mr. Bell, you have mentioned the cost to Ohio. I would think that that study did not include the cost of therapy for victims throughout the process of their lives and their families' lives and their children's lives and the impact of their families. I just, having been involved in government here at Capitol for just 6 months, I was in the legislature in Arizona, and I've looked, the staff has looked up the statistics on what's occurred in Arizona, and we had over 6,000 cases on the shelves. And I think that even in 2017, we failed to pass some laws to help victims be able to get information from those test kits. Again, I will go back. I just found this out. I think that my main concern here is one, Mr. Bell, and maybe you can answer this better than I can, but I look as we look out into the future, how do we never allow this to happen again? The cases I investigated were from very, very young children to the elderly. And they were some of the most emotional cases you could imagine. And the fact that our society is not willing, hopefully is willing, but has had relapses back time and time again. So I guess my major question is, how do we make sure from a funding standpoint, from a coordination standpoint, from an information standpoint, because this DNA testing has to get out to the other agencies. We have to have an educational effort within society. We have to be able to understand the role that we play in making sure that the victims that we should have been protecting all along, what's the cost going to be for us to be able to address those issues. And I'm going to leave that to Mr. Bell,
there's certain restrictions, there's certain obligations that the police have to have. They have to, on all new cases, submit to the laboratory any rape kit within 30 days. On the old backlog cases, all rape kits within 1 year.
Can I, just so I don't forget, does that also have to be submitted to a national database?
The laboratories are responsible for that once they put together a complete DNA profile.
And there's a requirement for that?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. So that the state code systems will attach to the federal code systems, and you'll know whether or not you're going to find a multi-state offender. So that's important, but you also have to have chiefs of police they have to understand that solving the acquaintance rape cases, I guess the issue is the reason why rape kits were never really needed to be tested before the Disney past, besides the one issue, was that if you knew the identity of the assailant, the prosecutors, the police, the juries, nobody would need to have the kit tested and stuff, because you had to prove ID. So if it was a date rape, the victim knew who the rapist was. That part of the case is kind of solved. The issue is just consent. But the testing has revealed that you solve these stranger rape cases because the stranger rapists who are dangerous offenders, sure enough, they are mean people to the people they know. So they're jerks to the people they know, and those cases have named suspects. So when you test all kits, as it was testified to here, then you can actually solve those unsolved cases, the stranger cases, because you look into the police reports on the other cases, the acquaintance rape cases, and you see the name. So that's important. So the police chiefs and the police departments have to realize the true value that there is out there. They need to become involved. The other thing is why it works in many of the different jurisdictions is because there's oversight over the police on these old cases. But there's someone else that's also working on those cases, whether it be the prosecutor's office in our jurisdiction, or the mayor's office in Shelby County, Memphis, Tennessee, or you have Kim Worthy in Detroit. You have to have a multidisciplinary approach where you have other people watching each other work. And that's important. I hope that answers.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, just a quick statement. I just, as this committee works on, I believe we've just scratched the surface of where our laws are today and the coordination processes. And I look forward to working with the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And obviously, it's a state-by-state effort that we're going to continue on. Ms. Wasserman-Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to really thank all four co-chairs for your leadership in creating this task force. It's a little hard to believe that with all the task forces we have, that we haven't had one that focuses on the importance of responding and addressing sexual assault and all facets of the problems with it. So I want to really commend you. Each of us has been involved in this issue individually as legislators, and collectively we're going to be able to really be more effective. So I'm looking forward to participating. Because there are so many questions that I want to ask. I'm really asking not only as a legislator, but as a mother who is about to send my first daughter to college in 1 week from today. And knowing the, unfortunately, very significant statistics that exist on college campuses of the likelihood of young women experiencing sexual assault during college. So addressing, and I'll add that my daughter is here with me today, which for me is a little scary but important because I want her to hear and be prepared to make sure that she can keep herself safe. I've been involved in the rape kit testing issue for a very long time. We have more than 13,000 untested rape kits in the state of Florida, and proportionally, that's an astonishing number, but we're also a state of 20 million people. Doesn't excuse it, but it is a frighteningly large problem. law enforcement leadership refused to respond, ignored entreaties from me, from the victim, from other people in positions of authority. So what do you think we need to do? Mechanically, there are things we can do. Passing legislation to address rape kit reform is important. But I'd like Ms. Hargitay and you, as well as pastors, because you are not law enforcement, what do you think we should be doing to help people who are working on these issues every day and have the ability to use the mechanics of their position to help address making this a priority and helping them understand that it is a priority?
Talk about it. I just want to say, it's so exciting to be in a room with such passionate and like-minded people. I think the first thing, I just want to say thank you again for your testimony. And, my heart hurts right now. My heart, physically hurts. And I got choked up and I cried during my testimony. But I want to say that it's because we carry so much. I obviously have access to my emotions because that's what I do for a living. But what I'm saying is to hear these stories, to hear words like you said, dehumanizing, these lives derail the way that lives go off track. These are not kids sitting on a shelf. These are people's lives sitting on a shelf, getting derailed. Children getting derailed of what is this life supposed to be. I was on this track. Can't even make sense of what's happened to me. And we have been letting perpetrators go by not testing these kids and saying we don't care about this issue. So, as I said earlier to you, these are scary issues that people have turned away from because they're frightening. But this is about talking about it. This is about a revolution. This is about facing these issues head on and saying, guess what, kids? We need to talk about this. This is what's going on. But what you said was so important because the funding is critical. We can't do any of this without the funding, obviously. And the education and the reshifting these victim-blaming attitudes are what we need to change, and that's about talking about it. As I, in my field, have spoken about the Rape Kit Backlog, people, as I said before, have no idea. They don't know that this is happening. They don't realize that if you don't test a kid, which is usually not from a stranger, but from somebody they know. They said in the movie that you spoke about earlier, in I Am Evidence, the film, which by the way is not out yet. It was a screening last night. It will be out probably in next spring or this Christmas on HBO. But somebody in law enforcement says we have rapes, but most of them are consensual sex because the people knew each other, because they knew each other. And that, in my opinion, is the problem.
Can I just, I think you're right. We do need to talk about it. I think I'm going to try to start talking about it in a little bit more laser-focused way. And I don't know if any of my colleagues have done this, but I think I'm going to, when I go home, convene my police chiefs and our county sheriff and ask them to come and sit with me for me to help shine a spotlight on this and ensure that they're making it a priority and use our platform and profile that we have to be able to do that. But also, I want to know more from them about how much of a priority this is for them.
So it's also the issue of consent. That is the issue. So you ask, what is it? We have to talk about what rape is. Because just because you know the person that raped you doesn't mean that it's not rape. Right? That is one of the core issues, as we know. And the fact that these perpetrators change lanes. We know that they escalate. Anthony Soa, that you brought up, is a perfect example. Perfect example. This is a man who raped, and then escalated, and then he murdered. And he murdered how many women? 11 women. And there were countless women going to law enforcement and saying, this man raped me, and they weren't believed. So this is an issue of being believed.
And they're less believed when the rape occurs with someone they know.
Yes.
And it
Always.
is much less likely
Always.
that it gets prosecuted,
Always.
and that's unacceptable. So,
And awareness, I'm sorry.
No, please.
It's so important with the law officials, because like I said, when I was working at 13, how the police came in and talked to me, did you know him, was your boyfriend, are you sure you didn't let him in the window, you know, are you sure, ask me all these questions, making me feel like maybe it was something I did wrong, what were you sleeping in, did you always sleep that way, were you always on the couch? That was damning to me, for you to shift that blame on me as a child, that was not fair to me. And so that's one of my concerns, that we educate, these people in these positions, these police officers, when they're dealing with victims, because some of them they will, as they say, the young folks, they will look at you side-eye as you speak to them. You need to understand the place I'm in now. I don't understand the place I'm in right now. Like she said, I was totally derailed at night, and I was confused. And I'm like, why are they talking to me this way? What did I do wrong, Mom? All I did was lay on this couch and sleep. And why are they talking to me? Like I did something. He had a knife in my throat. This scar, I didn't ask for this scar. I didn't ask for this to happen to me. So why am I being treated this way? This is something I did not understand for a long time. And it made me bitter for a long time with the police officers. Because I'm like, how cruel are you? How insensitive are you? Do you have daughters? Do you have mothers? Now do you have sons, because it's happening to our young men? Do you understand what I'm going through? So we have to continue to raise awareness. We have to, I don't know if we have to do victim panels with the police officers, but they have to have some sort of education to realize what victims go through, so they can know how to handle them, and they can do the questioning right, and they can make sure they can get the right evidence. Because most victims, if you come at them the wrong way, they're going to shut down. They're not going to open up. They're already ashamed of the things that's happening to us. We already don't understand what's going on in the processes right now. So if you come at me incorrectly, or if you don't speak to me in a manner where I feel safe with you, I feel comfortable with you, that I feel that you're genuinely concerned about what's happening to me at this moment in my life, I'm not going to be able to reveal or even articulate the things that's really happening to me. So we have to raise awareness, and we have to educate our law officials and our public officials. And that's why I'm excited today that you form this task force to say, we're going to make this difference, and we're going to make this change, and we're going to make a difference in our victims' lives.
Absolutely. To my colleagues last
It's
week.
fixable. I just want to read it.
It is.
It is fixable.
It is.
We have a plan.
Absolutely. I want to just call it a shameless plug, but I passed out a dear colleague to my colleagues about mine and our Republican colleague, Lamar Smith's legislation to help make sure that we add to the Fair Housing Act domestic violence and sexual assault, because we have discrimination that goes on when someone applies for rental housing or is trying to remain in their home when they were a victim. And many apartment complexes have a policy that if you have a crime occur, then the person is a victim. Well, of course, the victim is not the perpetrator of the crime, and they often and usually get evicted as well. So I would just urge you to consider co-sponsoring that legislation with Congressman Smith and I. Thank you, and thank you so much for all your testimony today and your courage.
Thank you very much. Representative Dingle, a question.
I want to thank all of the co-chairs for convening this task force and all of the witnesses. I've met a couple of you when you came to Detroit. Both of you two of you came to Detroit at different times. Wayne County, which is my home, had 11,341 untested, and then we found another 500, and we formed a task force to address the issue. Several people at this table were helpful. We were able to raise $17 million so far. I don't know why we should have to work that hard to raise it. We currently have fewer than 1,000 remaining of the 2009 backlog hits. And Kim Woodley, who was our prosecutor, who's a fabulous woman, and who has, the work so far has resulted in 78 convictions and the identification of 784 suspected serial rapists. and over 50 of the 784 are believed to have committed sex assaults 10 to 15 times each. And when I talked to Kim, she needs money. It's not just for, as you've raised, now the money's there needed for the investigation and the prosecution of the cases. So I guess the question that I would ask is, of all of you, is we're trying to raise awareness. I'm really aware of what it's like to call the police and have them not respond, the stereotyping people. I'm concerned now. In the last couple of months, I've had several high schoolers that were raped. And while the school responded appropriately, calling law enforcement, have been demonized by the local community, and people don't understand that it's happening now not only in colleges and high schools. I had a young high school, it was an 8th grader male, come up to me at a town hall meeting and say, we have to start to educate us in grade school. We've got to.
That's right.
It was very touching. He was afraid to say it publicly, but he came up to me later. What would each of you say to us? We know we've got to raise money. I'm even wondering, I'm not a prosecutor like several of them are. Can we swap in every jurisdiction? Is that allowed to swap every? Do we need to pass a law? Is that now allowed? And what would each of you say we should be doing to help raise awareness? What laws aren't on the books? And I do know, I agree with Debbie, I lived in a domestic violence situation, and nobody expects that somebody like me lives through what I lived in or hid in closets. And I know we've all got to talk about it more because people stereotype and don't want to talk about it. But what do we need to do? We each have experienced this from a different perspective. What do we need to do to help raise awareness, raise the money, and help the victims, and take away this typical stereotyping that you're talking about, and to raise awareness among, it's training for these law enforcement officers. They have to become, they're part of it. I mean, I can remember calling the police, and there was no way that anybody was going to help me. I mean, it was door handles were taken off the doors, we were hiding in closets, we were going to be shot because of the man that was going to do it. There was nobody that was going to help us. We got to help raise awareness and take that away. So how do we, I take all of your suggestions for what we need to do, or any of yours.
Let me start out by saying, as elected officials, as the public, we need to ensure that our safety forces are thoroughly, compassionately investigating all of these cases. I sat on Cleveland City Council as a local elected official, like perhaps many of you started in. I sat on the safety committee, but I had no idea that within Cleveland Police Department there were 5,000 rape kits that were untested. It certainly was never a discussion that was had at the committee table. And when this whole tragedy occurred, it shed a light on something that has now gone nationwide. And there are these kits that were sitting unbelievably untested on shelves throughout our country. And I think as representatives, both locally, federally, state, we need to put and we need to push that these cases are critical. They all need thorough investigation. Every victim needs to be heard. And I think we can all do our part in making sure that this is a priority going forward, that every one of these cases are handled in an appropriate manner, and justice is sought and received by the victims of these horrendous crimes. But I think it starts at every level of government, that we all ask the tough question is, how are these cases being investigated? Are they being thoroughly investigated? Are the victims receiving the support and help that they need? And I think that's the best thing that we can do going forward, because we all know now that there's a huge problem. Ohio's perhaps a little bit ahead of other states because we had an Attorney General, Mike DeWine, who took this as a priority, perhaps because he was a former county prosecutor and is now our Attorney General. He understood the significance of getting these kids tested. And so again, I suggest that we work with our law enforcement partners, but we ensure we ask the tough questions about these particular cases.
if I may speak from the healthcare perspective, I think that there are a couple of things that we need to do. As Mariska mentioned, we certainly need to be talking about it, and that talk needs to extend to the healthcare community. We need to do a far better job of understanding that sexual violence is a public health care issue, that the short and long-term consequences of that type of assault can be significant, and that every single one of our patients has the potential to develop healthcare-related issues from the violence they've experienced, which means we need to be talking about sexual violence and screening for sexual violence widely. We need to be teaching it in medical and nursing schools. Our residents need to be able to understand the impact of violence on the healthcare of the patients that they're seeing in emergency departments, critical care, in a variety of healthcare settings. And then, of course, we need access to sexual assault nurse examiners who are understood to be more than simply evidence collectors, but really as healthcare specialists to attend to those healthcare issues and potentially prevent some of the sequelae of the sexual violence. So from our perspective, certainly the discussion needs to be happening at all levels of our professional development and our patient interactions.
Thank you. I appreciate the answer. And I understand Representative Spear, you have a question?
I have a couple of questions. Dr. Markowitz, you referenced that level 1 and 2 trauma centers require all levels of care for everything except for sexual assault. It seems like that would be a good place for us to begin in terms of trying to highlight the importance of having qualified, skillful, SANE nurses available. They don't have to necessarily be at the hospital. They can be on call. There's many ways it can be done. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with it. I think that if we had sexual assault nurse examiners in every level 1 and level 2 trauma center, that would mean that the vast majority of Americans would be within a 60-minute drive or helicopter ride to a sexual assault nurse examiner program or sexual assault forensic examiner program that would widely expand access to that kind of critical healthcare service.
Mr. O'Malley and Mr. Bell, I have always been flummoxed by the fact that many states have statute of limitations for rape. We just did a quick review. Texas has a 10-year, Ohio has 20, New Hampshire has 6 years, Pennsylvania has 12, North Dakota 7, Florida has none for sexual battery with physical force or deadly weapon, 4 years for first-degree offenses, and 3 years for any other degree. It seems to me at a time when we have DNA, where you can link clearly, without question, that a victim was assaulted by this individual, we shouldn't have a statute of limitations at all. So could you speak to that and whether that's and it seems like that was a stumbling block for you in terms of the cold cases that dated back in time?
It's a good point. I think what you'll see in Ohio has changed the 20-year to a 25-year now. And it could extend beyond that if you have DNA that's discovered, collected, and then sent to the laboratory. And if you do it properly within a time period, there's a penalty for law enforcement if they don't follow the time periods. Then that statute of limitations will not extend for an additional 5 years from 25 to 30. So there are ways to do so, but there's lobbyists on the other side that would lobby for defendants' rights, saying that that's too long a period of time, that there could be changes that have occurred, witnesses that may no longer be present to be able to refute victims' testimony, that people's memories fade, and so there is a delay in the process if you don't have something to force the police to bring these charges, investigate the cases beforehand. But your point about with the advent of DNA, that statute of limitations can extend and perhaps disappear is very well put.
Last question to you, Mr. Bell. You had indicated that every arrestee should be swabbed, that that's one of the pillars of your recommendation. We looked at that in California some decades ago, and the ACLU was all over it because you're slaughtering Westies and not convicted felons. Could you just speak to that issue?
Certainly. The arrestee information is put into the CODIS database. If somebody is exonerated, their cases could be sealed, and they are automatically sealed by the CODIS administrators upon notification. So in Ohio, we were able to overcome that same type of attack by putting in restrictors, making sure that there were proper notifications that would be put in place for the laboratories to know from the police or from the prosecutors or from the courts or clerk of courts when somebody hasn't been exonerated or their cases have been sealed and their DNA can then be taken out of the CODIS system. So that's something that can be overcome, those challenges. I know that for instance, our task force has testified in front of other states' legislatures. The state of Washington was very receptive to the idea that this is a mini innocence project in and of itself. So if you test all kids, you can actually find out whether or not somebody has been falsely accused. And that played very well in certain parts of the country. So it's something that will be explored. These issues have been with us since the early 1990s when the CODIS was first being formulated. Do you do convictions, only felonies, violent felonies? Do you also include sexual assaults? And then it has, in fact, expanded over the period of 25 years now. So I would expect that will continue to expand.
Thank you. Patrick, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been an emotional week on Capitol Hill for reasons people are fully aware. But I have to tell you, this hearing is about as effective a hearing as I think I've attended in quite some time. And I thank you for the depth of exploration of some of these things. And I know what leaves you frustrated is we're touching things that we could take any part of it and spend a whole year in categorizing. But we don't have that luxury at the moment. We can work together on this. But I just want to ask a couple of follow-up questions. Ms. Hargitay, let me start with you because I think you articulated this progress that we've made and that you have this plan that will get us to 2020 where we might see this to an end. And so could you just take a moment and let us know where we are and then what the rest of that plan would consider? I'm going to lay these out and then you can be responsive. D.A. O'Malley or Mr. Bell, your statistics are overwhelming. I'm not just trying to say this is interesting. 670 serial cases out of your backlog. And you're Cuyahoga, Ohio. We have cities of your size all across America. How much are we going to find if we take this same model and replicate it? So what is being done? And I know, we can see some things here with funding, but we see it in all kinds of things we'd like to fund. The question is, you have such a compelling case. How are your colleagues in the DAs working to the NDAA, Attorneys General, or others demonstrating the impact that you are having and compelling those who are responsible for funding things to say we've got to make this a priority back in their areas? And lastly, Ms. Markowitz, I have such respect for the work that you're doing in this space and the ability is, again, because while we're talking about evidence, you really seem to be so principally focused on the treatment of the victim. You spend time talking, and we always talk about the treatment of the victim with respect to, okay, let's make sure we get our organ, because there are male victims as well in this. Let's make sure we get them and get so we can get the evidence. And we'll move on, and we forget about them. Can you talk about the part of the SANE program that is then there to help this victim reconnect to some of the services or other kinds of things that will allow other parts of them to go heal, up to and including the other kinds of inclusive medical issues that can arise because of the trauma, because of the other things that are associated with it. So I know it's a lot, but if the if those who are here could touch on those issues, I'd be grateful.
I'll make it quick. You know, obviously the goal here is to pass reform in all 50 states. So, by 2020. So I think the, you know, you mentioned 4 pillars, and we have the Joyful Heart sort of 6 pillars to comprehensive reform. And that would be to start with auditing, specifically audit and know exactly how many kits we have. Obviously to test every kit in the backlog and to test in time all new kits. Obviously we're working on tracking. You know, if we can track our children's Christmas presents, why can't we track a rape kit? It's just like a disgrace, and what we're saying is not important. So the tracking is so key. And the other thing, you know, is a victim's right to know. I spoke briefly about victim notification, but at Joyful Heart, we've invested in 2 years of research of how the victim, if the victim, when the victim, how the victim wants to be notified. And that is so important to speak to what the victim needs. And again, keep the survivor at the center. And funding. So those are sort of our 6 pillars to reform. And, you know, again, I just wanted to go back to what you asked about the testing and what people believe. There are 5 reasons, like concrete reasons, to test every single kid and to test assailants there that we know, because the first is to identify an unknown suspect, right? If we put somebody's DNA in CODIS, then all of a sudden we can get a hit on that. Then it can match an unknown suspect, somebody that we already know. Go, hey, put those 2 together. Bing, we have 2. Corroborate the victim's account. If the victim said he did this and he says, no, I didn't, and then we find DNA there, we're like, well, you're out. Discredit the perp's account of the rape, and again, exonerate the innocent. So there are so many reasons. That's why I just think it should be tested, and every time, you know, to get a swab, because then we are preventing so many rapes from happening. In the film that I made, you see how many women wouldn't have been raped if one kid was tested. One.
I just wanted to let it'd be nice if we could get that up, just we could screen it here and the Hill, just after meeting.
Well,
Thank you.
it's
For Representative Means' question, I think within Ohio, you know, we have formed such a great partnership amongst law enforcement agencies, and the public is well aware of this horrible situation that these cases had and these kids had sat on shelves. So I think the light of scrutiny has been shown upon these kids, and so we have a collaborative effort in Ohio that I think other states can certainly follow. But one of the things in my 5 months in office that I've now learned that perhaps may be a pattern for other states as well is ensuring that when an individual is arrested and fits within the parameters of the law of an individual who needs to be swabbed, is making certain that law enforcement is taking the swab and sending it down to enter into the system. Because I have found within our own county, since 2011 when our law was passed in the state of Ohio, we have thousands of individuals who should have been swabbed, have not been swabbed. So as Rick talked about earlier about another branch of the same tree, we need to make sure this branch is surely developed completely. And so it has now come to our attention. We have sat down with our partners in the criminal justice system, and it says, our law says they shall be arrested and they shall be swabbed upon arrest. Shall is shall, and there's not a lot of wiggle room there. And so it's sitting down with our law enforcement partners, our local sheriff, and saying, this needs to happen. And as we all know, those who do not want to swab often have a reason to not want to be swabbed. And it's incumbent upon us, and it's incumbent upon law enforcement to make sure that we receive it.
And so I'll try to briefly identify or answer the question that you've asked me. I think that we are so used to thinking about SANEs and our role as collectors of the sexual assault evidence collection kit. But what we recognize is that for a lot of our patients, they have limited interaction with the healthcare system, and so during the exam, we have the ability to identify healthcare issues that they may not have even been aware of. We certainly have the ability to attend to some of the preventative aspects like immunizations and things like that while they're with us. We also have the ability during that encounter to connect them with critical resources both within the medical community and within the larger community as well, including both mental health and physical health care resources. So I think the ability to be able to address all of the healthcare issues that individuals come in with is an important part of what we're able to do, whether we can attend to all of it at once or at least be able to begin the process of connecting patients with the ability to receive the care that they may need. I think the other thing to recognize is that there are not only positives for our patient population when we address both the healthcare and the evidentiary needs, but as research is beginning to tell us, there are real criminal justice impacts for our patients when we treat them as more than simply crime scenes. And I'm so sorry, Lavinia, for your experience with the healthcare system. It should never, ever happen. Patients should not walk into a healthcare system and feel as though they're insensitive, that they're only concerned about collecting the evidence and not really dealing with the whole individual, which is what happens when we treat patients solely as crime scenes. And what we've discovered in the research, which is really promising, is that when patients are provided options, when they come in for healthcare, when they are connected to critical resources, when they're given choices, what we see is that those patients are more likely to engage with the criminal justice system, they're more likely to work with investigators, they're more likely to be willing to move forward in the criminal justice system. So I think that there's a real benefit holistically to being able to deal with patients' healthcare issues as well as simply the evidentiary ones. And I appreciate very much your comments about that.
Can I say something? To tag pretty much off of what everybody else said. With my rape, me coming from a victim perspective, my perpetrator, once he raped me, and me finding out later that my kid went on the shelf, he went on to carjack and rape another young lady. Had my evidence been processed, they could have caught him then. He did another rape. He went to prison for 10 years because this time he raped somebody's grandmother. Same MO, went into her window and raped her at knife point. Wow, all this time, my kid's still on the shelf. All of this could have been prevented. And that hurt me because I felt like part of it was my responsibility again. Had they, investigated my kids and saw my crime, Mr. Kevin Lynn Turner could not be out damaging other victims' lives. And so that's part of the devastation for me to know that this happened. And then when my case finally was solved in 2006, Kevin Lynn Turner was coming up for parole, and most likely because how the laws were in Texas at the time with the statute of limitations, I couldn't prosecute. But the governor at that time, which I think was Rick Perry, and the chief of police and other staffers helped protest his parole, he was able to stay in because in the state of Texas told me, they said we're going to be the laughing stock of the country if we allow him out, knowing that we have all this evidence against him, but you can't prosecute. So that was very devastating to know that you have evidence, you have DNA, which I've always called a footprint from God. It's a reason it's there, and we don't take advantage of the blessings that we have to use to stop these criminals in their tracks. And then what you were saying, Dr. Jennifer, in regards to the health issues, me as a child growing up, not getting the proper care, being stressed, it caused all kinds of health issues for me. And I didn't realize that. And it wasn't until I got in my 30s and I had a doctor that was concerned about so many issues with me, and he began to probe. And he got out of me about my sexual assault. And he said, I promise you that, the overeating, because I stress eat, the grinding of my teeth, rubbing down my teeth, so many other health issues just from that sexual assault not being addressed. And so I'm thankful that I'm in a better place now, and I've begun my healing process and become whole. But these are things that happens to victims every single day, because we just look over it. You know, we expect them to just get by, you'll be okay. But it's damaging, and it's not just the rape itself, it's a lifelong effect. Exactly. It happens.
I just want to add, last night at the screening, somebody, a young woman who was a nurse, raised her hand and said that she had seen some things about healthcare in the hospital. And she specifically asked, how do I need to know, I need training, how do I deal with survivors? She goes, I've seen some things that people are not treating people the way they should be treated. And that was a young nurse's question for us about how she could learn and how she could further her training.
So this is a wonderful place to say that this is the beginning of the conversation. We do have a hard stop. People have to get to their planes and such. I want to thank my colleagues for being with us. This is beyond my